Burdens, we all have them. Some are not so big and others are light, but Jesus promises us that the burdens he's going to give us are going to be light. My yoke is easy, my burden light. How can Jesus promise that our burdens will be light? Probably because he promises to give us only light burdens, and all the others may not be what he's chosen to give us. Mayo Clinic did some studies years ago about healthy living, and they talked about the 4 arms that need to be kept in proper balance. And the 4 arms are work, play, love, and worship. Work, play, love, and worship. Or work, leisure, relationships, and worship. If we have one of those arms out of sync, giving it way too much emphasis, the other ones obviously don't get the emphasis, and we find ourselves imbalanced. There's a light burden, though, then in all of this. The fact that if we have the balance with all those 4, we'll find ourselves able to carry our anxieties and our burdens better. Maybe that's how Jesus wants us to remember how to turn them into light burdens. The key, however, is the last arm of that list, our worship of God, or the presence of God in our lives. One could easily, as a believer, say, it's pretty simple why we have such a mess in our world today. It's because God is no longer a part of it. It's going to be just work and leisure and play, leisure and relationships. And the first thing to start getting messed up as a result of God being taken out of it are relationships. And so our relationships end up becoming messed up. Let's learn a lesson from the buzzard, from the bumblebee, and from the bat. The buzzard. I joked last night that we have some buzzards in our parish. Unnamed at this point in time. But actually the buzzard I'm talking about is the one that lives in those evergreen trees over there on the highway. I can't remember now offhand what the name of those things are, but they're ugly little things and they love to eat dead stuff. Anyway, the buzzard. You put a buzzard in a 6-foot by 6-foot enclosure, and that buzzard will stay in there, even though the top is open. The buzzard will stay in there because the buzzard needs about 10 to 12 feet of running before he can take off. The bat. I've seen bats defy this particular fact, but most of the time, when bats are on a flat surface, they can't go anywhere. They can shuffle around, but they can't get started to get up in the air. That's why they hang upside down. They fall, and they right away go into their flying mode. And then the bumblebee, he sits inside this glass tumbler, and he's going to buzz around at the bottom of it. He's never going to get out because he wants to go this way. He can't figure out how to go up. Sorrow in our lives is when we continually look back. Worry is when we look around. Faith is when we look up. Jesus' sweet and light burden is possible when we look up and remember that he's the one that can help us carry our burdens. In 6 years, we as a country will be 250 years old. Not very old when it comes to the scheme of things in our world, but 250 is a good number to be arrived at, and we wonder, are we going to get there? We worry a lot. Most of us, if we're in touch with the news that's going on, feel the burden and the stress and the tension all around us. We live certainly in a little bit of a bubble here, but all of that has come home to roost with all the problems we as a country have, it seems. And I think, first of all, about the pandemic we're going through. Probably the most frustrating thing about the pandemic for us is the fact that we lack normalcy. And what normalcy is predictability. You can't predict when you get up in the morning really what your day is going to be like. What's going to change? Because there's two things that are put into motion that we cannot guarantee anymore or cannot feel confident about. And they're really core values, core things. First is health, and second is, that's it, basically health, when our health is put into it. Because this is the part that upsets the health part of it. And that's a kind of safety and security that's related to healthiness. And so we worry a little bit about contact. Be interesting to see in the next 10 days or so what's going to happen with any kind of infections within our area here because of all the family gatherings that have taken place or are taking place. And then, what do I do with that? I take those problems, that feeling of unpredictability, that feeling of anxiety that comes from a lack of normalcy, and I bring it to something that I can at least bank on as being normal. I can take it to prayer, and I talk to the Lord about it, and I just spell out my feelings to Him about it all. And I find in that experience one predictable thing, one real pillar, one strength. It's God Himself. So maybe that's what Jesus refers to about the yoke. We're connected to Him. Stay connected to Him, and you'll find the most important thing quite predictable. He is the pillar you can count on. When I reflect on all the terrible lack of unity in our nation, issues of polarization, extremism, even the fear of speaking out for we will be shouted down or even attacked, all of the stuff that relates to all the racial tensions in our country and the revelations of how this has become part of our consciousness, I fear that's the burden that comes from that one. Lack of predictability on the first one, burden of fear on this one. I fear, and that's why my question comes, of what will our country look like in 250, when we're 250? Well, only one thing can help with this particular one, it seems to me, is the message that Jesus gives us, the core messages He gives us about how we are to follow Him. We are to love our neighbor, even love our enemy, and practice 70 times 7 types of forgiveness. There was Zen religion is a religion that's situated in the Near East, or in the Far East, and there was a priest in that Zen religion in Japan that wanted to reprint their scriptures so that many people in the country of Japan could read them. And so Tetsugen, the priest's name, began a campaign to try to raise the money. This was before the printing press and all that sort of thing. And it took him 10 years to finally come up with maybe enough funds so that this Zen scriptures could be repeated and then brought out to so many people within the country. But about the time he was ready to start the work on it, after he had collected enough funds, the Urji River flooded drastically, and many people lost their homes, and there was starvation, and there was all sorts of problems that come from that natural disaster. And he took the money that was for the printing and gave it to the poor. After things settled down, he went ahead and started the campaign again. Took him 10 years to come up with the funds again. This time there was an epidemic. People were suffering, people were dying. And he gave the money away again, this time to help with that problem. It took him 20 years after that to finally raise enough money to actually carry it out. The original printing of those Zen scriptures is contained in a monastery in Kyoto, Japan. The story goes, and the people tell the story this way. They said that Tetsugen had 3 versions of the Zen scriptures. The first 2 are invisible, but they are the most important ones. Because he used his effort to help others. There's your love your neighbor. There's your love your enemy, taking root even in another religion. Therefore, it is our call from Jesus to do the same in ours. So it is then with these problems that we've got, problems that relate to the epidemic, problems that relate to the tensions in our country. We bring them to the Lord, who is the one predictable pillar. And from him, we know that he helps us carry it, because he promised in the words of Jesus today, "My yoke is easy, my burden light."